Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel, and thank you guys for tuning in to another BC Lions post game recap video. Coming at you guys live after the BC Lions just lost in week number 2 of the CFL season to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 31-14, falling in Winnipeg. A very, gotta add that second, very disappointing outing effort on behalf of the BC Lions here tonight. And of course, folks, we're going to talk all about it here on the post-game report. But before we do, of course, a few reminders. Folks, if you guys are tuning in on YouTube, please feel free to like the video, comment down below, let us know that how you guys are feeling. Let your frustrations be known in the comment section down below. Take them out in the comment section, but don't take them out too hard on myself because I will be reading them. So let us know how you're feeling, especially if you're a Lions fan. I would imagine pretty frustrated as I am a little right now, although kind of having a little bit of perspective after doing this for now. Just thinking about this, but before I was kind of getting my notes together for the show, going to be my third year of doing post game reports, recaps, whatever you guys want to call them, dating back a few years ago when I used to do this on Twitter, utilizing Twitter Spaces, and I would jump on the Twitter Spaces normally after BC Lions games back in 2022 a little bit, mostly in 2023, or excuse me, opposite. Mostly in 2022, a little bit in 2023. We kind of dabbled into the post-game reports in 2023 a little bit with the Blue and Orange Hour, and then, of course, kind of adapted towards what we're doing now with Blake eventually in 2024, and now we're in 2025 of doing this. So we've had to jump on here after some pretty bad losses from the BC Lions. I kind of thought about one more specifically last year that was kind of relates to this one a little bit more better of early season. The Lions had a little bit of an uglier effort. Like I mentioned last season, 2024, when they lost to the Toronto Argonauts. That was, I believe, the opening game, or if I could be mistaken myself, where the Lions had the week 1 bye. That could have been a week 2 matchup. But when they lost to Toronto in Toronto last year, was a bit of a ugly one, unfortunately, for the Lions that will stain. Will leave a stain for at least the next 9 days by the time I'm recording this, 8 days by the time this is out. It's going to be a long, tough wait for the next time they have an opportunity to play on the field and correct some things and make sure that people have a different opinion of the BC Lions next time they're on the field. So, as I mentioned, like the video, comment down below. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel when you guys do. Press the notification bell. You guys get notified every single time we go live or upload a video. And of course, as you guys are listening to this, you guys obviously are well aware that this is not a live post-game show. Was not wanting to go live after that effort. Wanted to save our first live of the season for a good win to talk about and some good, I feel like, input from the chat. Whereas, a loss like that, I'm kind of hoping that a lot of people were able to maybe, flush it. There's a lot of other things going on outside of football than being all worked up about a loss. Of course, you are well within your right to overreact and feel the way that you want to. Obviously, it comes with being a die-hard fan, a football fanatic. So feel the way you want to do. As I mentioned, let us know how you feel in the comments. Not too hard though. Don't take it out too hard on the kid here. But lastly, before we get into the show a little bit more, of course, follow our social media platforms. You guys can see down below there. You guys can follow us on Instagram at Canadian Football Fanatics, as well as on Twitter at _CF Fanatics as well. So before we get into the post-game recap now, I am hoping that you guys are hearing me loud and clear and okay. I am, as I mentioned, pre-recording this, and this is not live, so I would hate to have any internet technical difficulties, but I am seeing, unfortunately, for those that are StreamYard users, the little Wi-Fi icon popping up in the left-hand corner. So hoping you guys are hearing us okay, loud and clear. But let's get on to the post-game recap here in 1 second. Let me just send out a quick text, grab a drink, and we will get on to it, folks. All right. Post-game recap week number 2. The BC Lions falling 31-14, as I mentioned. A very, very disappointing effort. A ugly game, as I mentioned on Twitter, actually. I haven't talked about the game yet, as we were just starting the post-game report. But on Twitter, as I was going back and forth of just unfortunately an ugly game from pretty much start to finish from the BC Lions. Another slow start on behalf of the BC Lions. I didn't pick up who won the coin toss or not, but the Winnipeg Blue Bombers end up starting with the football, and they end up cutting through the BC Lions defense like butter. They march all the way down the field, and major props to, we will get into this in a little bit, Chris Strevler, who made multiple big time throws in the game. Hat tip to you, Chris Strevler. I kind of alluded to it on the previews on our weekly show of, if you're the BC Lions, if you're Mike Benavides, Ryan Phillips, dare Chris Strevler to beat you. And he essentially did that himself. Brady Oliveira starts out very hot in the game. He has 2 carries for 49 yards. They're talking about it on TSN with obviously Nielsen and I don't know why I want to say Chris Cuthbert, but Glenn Suter, excuse me. They're talking about it. Oh, Brady, two carries for 49 yards on the first drive, and he rips off a pretty long one there, that second one, and he goes down what looked to be pretty routinely on his right shoulder, and they end up showing a replay of the play and ends up coming back to the huddle, looking pretty uncomfortable, little bit of kind of grimacing in pain, and kind of you could tell he was definitely fighting through pain at the least. Now, what he was kind of, what was going on the inside, I would love to know for sure, and definitely as a concern, not only for Bombers fans, but as I mentioned, Canadian football fans like us, fanatics, some might call us. Brady Oliveira ends up leaving the game with, obviously, the Bombers, who hold their cards as close to the chest as anybody. There's no reports that were let out basically within that first kind of quarter that it happened. And into the second, I believe TSN finally got the report that actually, no, it actually wasn't. Actually, forgive me. It was DB Darren Bombing of Bonfire Sports. Of course, we had Zach Schnitzer on to preview the game. Zach and DB are doing the post-game show, Bonfire After Dark, I would imagine. Winnipeg After Dark. Forgive me if I'm butchering the name, fellas, as we speak right now. And usually I would kind of try to chime in when the Lions play the Bombers, because I do enjoy their guys' coverage, not only of the Bombers, but of the CFL as a whole. And as I mentioned, kind of forget where I was talking about. What I want to come back to is Brady Oliveira here, folks, of, you know, 2 carries, 49 yards, explosive start to the game where it was like, oh no, this going to be a big game for Brady where he's going to be able to do whatever he wants. That only opens up downfield for the Bombers even more. And he ends up leaving the game with DB reporting it's a upper body injury. I did have my story straight up coming back to Brady's injury, so we're all good here, folks. A little tired. It is a little bit of a late night edition of the post game report, although it is not as a late night edition as it was last week, as I recorded at 1:30, a record time for recording the post game report. 1:30 to about 2:30 we got off, uploaded it by about 3, and we're kind of in bed and sleeping by about 3:30. So it was a long day. This one I'm going to be able to hit record about 9:30, going to be off here by 10:30 and in bed by 11. It's going to be enjoy my Friday, and then it's on to the weekend, folks, where we have some more CFL football to enjoy. But of course, we're talking about the BC Lions and Winnipeg Blue Bombers first, talking about Brady Oliveira and leaving the game with a shoulder injury. It was then reported on TSN that he was dealing with an upper body injury, who would not return to the game. And for the Bombers, obviously that is a bummer. And I would imagine they are hoping that it is short term, as short term as possible. That being said, one Matthew Peterson, friend of the program, has been on the channel before, had him on as a podcast guest in 2024 before his draft, which I know they were telling him he's a rookie, which I guess technically is, because he went back to school in 2024 as well, back to the University of Alberta. But Matthew Peterson, the good Canadian boy that he is, running the football very hard. and he ends up finishing the game, I believe, with a first career 100-yard performance in his first, I believe, regular season action, where I would imagine that kind of professional football gets put gets put into reality very quickly here, folks. I gonna try to bring it up. We're gonna turn on the Wi-Fi here quickly. Hopefully you guys are hearing me all good. And we're gonna see what Matthew Peterson ended up finishing with on the game, because it was an impressive day for the kid. 23 carries for 130 yards, one touchdown, 5.7 yards per carry. A great night for Matthew Peterson, the rookie. So Matthew, take a bow. Hat tip to you, buddy. As I said on Twitter, love seeing MP do well, especially in the pros, but wish it would have came in a few weeks' time when they're not playing the Lions. But that brings me to the point of something that we'll talk about here in a bit, or maybe we can actually kind of just start with this, because I think that was probably maybe the root of the problem is where we're going to start. And it was the fact that the BC Lions defense got gashed once again, a problem that has been a pain in the side of the BC Lions over the last few seasons, and has been questioned numerous times, of dating back to not only in the 2023 playoffs when they got eliminated to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 2022 playoffs when they got eliminated by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 2023 as well. Saskatchewan, kind of a similar situation last year in 2024, but is this still a problem, was kind of the question the BC Lions fans, maybe I should kind of rephrase this. It wasn't a problem necessarily that the Lions fans were asking. It was kind of, has this problem been fixed coming into the season? Of, did the Lions do enough to fix the run game issues? It had been talked about a few times with people around the organization, of the additions like Dwayne Hendricks in the middle of that defensive line, Micah Alway bringing a little bit more of that physicality, that nastiness to the defense. And tonight, it was unfortunately not on display when it comes to having a little bit of backbone when it comes to the run game. And obviously you can only do your job, so sometimes it's not maybe necessarily all on you, or maybe in football it is the most team game there is. But as a linebacker, right, if maybe your defensive tackle's job in front of you is to kind of keep you clean and not allow those offensive linemen to climb to the second level and get their hands on you, that can kind of limit you from your job as well. So I think just overall not a good showing. Is this a problem still? Yes, clearly it is. Now, do we want to overreact because it is one game? Not necessarily, but I would say that it is something to talk about. It is something that should cause a lot of people concern when it comes to the long-term outlook on the BC Lions this season, of September, October, and November football. When the weather gets nasty out in the prairies, especially if the Lions aren't able to win the West and they're going into other teams' buildings on the road in the playoffs, and they're playing outdoor in Saskatchewan in October and November. They're playing outdoor in Winnipeg in October and November, outdoor in, say, Calgary or Edmonton. Stopping the run is going to be priority number one in a lot of these games. And if, say, like I said coming into this game, you dare Chris Strevler to pass the ball and load the box to stop the run, and you can't stop the pass, well, oh boy, you got an issue that's snowballing, that's getting out of control very fast when it comes to an offense being able to pass the ball on you when you're loading up on the run. And once they get that pass game going, and you're scrambling to say, oh no, let's try to shore up our back end of our defense in the pass game, they start ripping off runs for big chunks. It is not a good sign early on in the season, especially when you're going to try to fix things on the fly going through a regular season. Of course, you have an opportunity like this one where you get kind of somewhat of a mini buy when it comes to playing on a Thursday. You kind of get that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday almost to kind of treat as a mini buy, get time away from the facility, get time to rest and recover, and then you get back into your normal routine next week of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practice, Friday kind of that walkthrough or travel day, depending on if you're going traveling to another city, and then of course the game on Saturday. So the Lions will have some time to maybe course correct, look over the film, see what they can do better. One positive might be is that they did do a pretty good job of slowing down the run game outside of the big rip from Brady Oliveira on that first drive, and then outside of Matthew Peterson's touchdown. But that being said, saying that, outside of those two runs, they did pretty good. You just can't erase the fact that those two runs happened, that they happened on that defense and were a big problem in this game. When you take those two runs away, one that set up a touchdown, one that was a touchdown, 14 points off the board, this game looks whole lot different, right? So definitely a issue to keep an eye on going forward, and one that I think is a issue that is a quick sound the alarm. This is a legitimate issue for the BC Lions because of what we've seen in the past history with the Lions and their run defense. I should say lack of run defense. So to continue on now, to get into maybe the offense, or to get back in, or to go, I guess, to the other side of the football is what I'm trying to get out here, folks. And going to be a little bit more of a different post-game recap, post-game report here tonight. Usually in wins, I guess this kind of comes with the territory of wins. We go through a little bit more of a game recap compared to losses, where we bounce all over the place and kind of talk through some things that I think were worth talking about. I guess is the best way to put it. Noteworthy, I guess, is what to say. And the next one would be Nathan Rourke's struggles versus Winnipeg, which I think is very odd because it's an interesting one where Nathan's had quite a bit of success versus most other teams in the CFL. But the Winnipeg Blue Bombers has been one that has stumped Nathan since coming into the CFL, now dropping to winless against the Bombers through multiple attempts in multiple different seasons. So, different schemes, different personnels. Of course, the Bombers has stayed kind of somewhat similar defensively, but different, as I said, personnel, different, I would imagine, kind of game plans, with Rourke and the Lions being in different stages of their growth and in their kind of where they are in terms of timeline. For me, the one familiarity with the success the Bombers have had against BC is that the fact they obviously pick something up in terms of Rourke's ability to get comfortable in the games, number one. And we're going to talk about this here in a little bit with some of the play calling that I thought was going to be a tough way to kind of phrase it of how I thought, but just I would like to see a little bit more, I don't know if I want to say adjustments or adaptability from Buck Pierce, although he is still, as a first-time head coach, he is still kind of learning his way and kind of still finding his groove as a head coach and offense coordinator in those two roles. Rourke's inability to look really comfortable or in rhythm early on versus the Bombers is a strange one, because that's when he's at his best, and when you kind of know that Nate's going to be having a good game coming in is, when he gets those fast starts, when the ball's coming out of his hands, when what we saw in week one of, kind of, I guess, to transition before we get back into Rourke here. We'll talk about the offensive game plan, I guess, to kind of get that out of the way before we get into Rourke. I feel like might be able to get a better transition into that conversation a little bit better when talking about the offensive game plan. So when talking about the offensive game plan, I tweeted about it at halftime there of, not really enjoying this week's game plan from Buck Pierce. I thought he did a fabulous job in week number one of giving Nathan some easy button type of concepts and reads. Now, what do I mean when I say easy button, first read type of concepts, or single read type of concepts? Easy read in terms of, reading one defender opposed to trying to read, the whole field, or read the coverage versus man type of aspect. There's going to be some plays that are in your system that are kind of, identify whether the corner is going to be in man coverage or, zone coverage, and that'll kind of tell you where to go with the ball. The play that the BC Lions kind of were running last week that the Bombers have made very famous in the past few years is kind of that flat route from one of the receivers, coming either out of the backfield or either that inside slot, and then kind of that outside receiver that does kind of that almost get lost in the defense and kind of sits down in the zone, where as a defense you almost have to pick your poison, and we saw it multiple times of going to Katoy, going to McInnes, going to Hatcher, some of those guys in the slot there, were putting the defense in a bind. Either way, whether they're in man or zone, you're wrong. And I thought, as I said, Buck Pierce did a pretty good job of that in week one of getting Nathan in rhythm early on, getting him some easy reads, getting him some easy completions, getting the ball out of his hands very quickly, not allowing that Edmonton Elks front seven, that pass rush to really have an impact on that game last week. And I felt like this week was a little bit different where I don't know if maybe the game plan was a little bit different where they wanted to attack downfield. They liked that matchup. I felt like, within, beating the pressure within beating the blitz, there is a solution to beating the blitz that comes with throwing the ball downfield. And I am open to that for sure. But it was a solution that wasn't working today when it comes to when bringing the blitz, when bringing pressure, which the Bombers were doing a majority of the time that Nathan was kind of dropping back to pass. You're going to get those one-on-one opportunities down the field, but you're also kind of playing into the defense's hands because that's what they're daring you to do is kind of playing into that 50-50 ball mentality. And if you're obviously the offense, you're confident in that and you believe in your ability to execute that. But if you kind of tear it back a layer, the 50-50 ball is just that. It's a 50-50 chance that your receiver comes down with it. It could be a 50% chance it's incompletion at the end of the day. So I didn't love that aspect of not really having an answer for the pressure that the Bombers sent early on. I thought if the BC Lions tried to adapt to a quicker game plan of trying to get the ball in Rourke's hands a little bit quicker, trying to get him some of those easy first reads, setting him up into some of those manageable down and distances in second down. Now, where things get a little bit interesting is when, you have a guy like Willie Jefferson coming off the edge and some of those quick hitters that Nathan was trying to get in rhythm throughout the game. Willie Jefferson's batting them down. Some of the other defensive lines batting them down. So it's a tough one. The other thing that I didn't like when it comes to the offense and no quick hitters, no ability to oppose a threat going east-west from the offense that we saw last week. We saw in the preseason even of having guys like Jermaine Jackson getting in motion, getting given the jet sweep passes, showing play action, giving different motions where receivers are lining up in all different areas, which we saw in week one. We didn't see that this week, which I thought was a little bit of an issue. And I made it kind of, I made my opinion known of I didn't really enjoy Buck Pierce's game plan this week. Would like to see him kind of, take advantage of this little mini bye here going in, be his own worst critic, which I'm sure he will be, going to the film room, see what kind of they were able to do better in week one, see what things they did good here this week because there was some good on the field, and kind of mesh those two together a little bit better in week number 3 and kind of find this true identity of what this offense is going to be. I also, within the deep shots, there was just a lot of deep shots that didn't look there, unfortunately, and within those deep shots as well, of when you're going against a blitz and those deep shots aren't there, and sometimes you're going into double coverage, and maybe if you're kind of from a quarterback's perspective, right? Those deeper routes, if you're seeing the pressure and your receiver, doesn't have maybe friendly quarterback body language towards you. And what I mean by that friendly quarterback body language, right? Say the pressure is gonna, be coming right from the Bombers, and they're gonna get there within, say, 2 to 3 seconds, right? If you're running, say, a post pattern, a comeback, a deep in, a deep out, and if the quarterback doesn't trust the timing with that receiver, or if he doesn't trust that he's gotten enough separation, he can't throw with anticipation. He can't get those balls out, or he just can't throw within that concept, right? And if you're kind of, let's say, a deep 15-yard comeback, that's going to take to get the 15 yards will take that, two and a half second, two and a fraction second to get there. If Nate doesn't like it within that second, he's coming off it, going another read, and maybe he's kind of going to that deep shot before it's even open, or without even knowing it's open because he's kind of feeling that pressure, wanting to get the ball out of his hands, and he's throwing the double coverage. What it seemed like a lot of the time, not to let Nathan off the hook. I think he would have loved to see himself play better. He's his own worst critic, as I said earlier there. It's just a weird one when talking about that. But to talk about or to kind of put a little bit of a bow on when talking about the offensive game plan, to transition into Nathan a little bit, I'm just curious what it is about Winnipeg for Nathan, what it kind of seems to be when it comes to, obviously, it has a hand in that the defense has playmakers, it has good players on the other side of the field. Don't get me wrong in that aspect, but Nathan himself is a very good player. I don't think that one bad game is going to. I'm not any of these dumb CFL fans that are, oh, Nathan Rourke is overrated, all this stuff. I think Nathan Rourke will bounce back just fine. But for whatever reason, he struggles when playing the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And as I said, it's not only been with one regime; it's been over multiple regimes, different playmakers, different players on his roster, and we have still yet to find out how to, you know, correctly, not maybe even correctly, but just positively affect the Winnipeg Blue Bombers offensively. And I don't even know if positively is the right word, but kind of get the ball moving where things seem smooth, right? Where the BC Lions offense with Nathan Rourke under center when playing the Winnipeg Blue Bombers the last few years, it feels like pulling teeth trying to move the chains to get first downs, which is not a good thing, not a good sign, especially with a lot of the turnover that happened defensively this year for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Guys like Terrell Ford out of that lineup, Adam Bighill, obviously, and they did a pretty good job today limiting the BC Lions. And I'm actually seeing I messed this actually up here, folks. I apologize. Actually, the graphic shows 31-14. I'm actually just recording. I'm just seeing this 27 minutes in, which is my bad completely. A very big mess up on my part as I'm awkwardly seeing this live right now. So the unfortunate part is that we can't go back as of now. So it was actually a 34-20 loss, folks. So that is completely my bad as I try to get back on tracks here. Just talking to, or just to, as I said a few seconds ago, put a bow on Nathan Rourke and the offensive game plan. I am curious to see how they're going to treat this little mini bye and try to see how they can really look themselves in the mirror and show how they can get better from this game. So lastly about Nathan Rourke is obviously he did not finish the game dealing with an oblique injury, which is the unfortunate part for Nathan Rourke. Folks, let me see if I can actually fix this on the fly here, which I think I can do. I'm going to continue talking to you guys as I fix this, though. Nathan Rourke obviously left with the oblique injury, which is it's a tough one. So Nathan did his media availability after the game, which is a good sign to see, and he was himself, quote, optimistic that he would be back in the lineup when these two teams play each other again in 9 days' time. Now, that being said, I wonder if that is the competitor of Nathan Rourke, and we'll see how he feels in the morning. I would think he's going to be maybe a little bit sore tomorrow, a little bit tender in that midsection. Boom, there we go, folks. My apologies. Hopefully now you guys are still sticking around for the entire show. It was 34-20, not 31-14. That is my mistake, folks. I apologize. Oblique injury. Oh boy. The BC Lions' biggest nightmare was definitely kind of came to the forefront very quickly. I was initially thought that Nathan was just disappointed in the throw he made to Keon Hasher, that he probably thought he could get it up with Tad higher. Obviously, with the injury, that's kind of probably what took that extra yard and a half off that football kind of towards the end there. He grabs towards his abdomen oblique area, which is kind of that side area, your little bit above your hip area. And he is visibly frustrated, and it was caught on the CFL TSN broadcast of, he kind of dropped the F bomb, and went back to the sideline, tried to throw it, and you could tell he just couldn't put any with Nathan and his quarterback coach Rob Williams as well, with how much kind of uh, whip and torque they kind of put into that midsection as well. I would imagine, it was a tough one for Nate to try to see if he can go, and then once he knew that he couldn't, he mentioned in his post-game media availability that he took himself out and mentioned that he thought it would be in the best interest of the team if Masoli went in to try to get the team a victory. So as I said he was optimistic he will be able to play versus Winnipeg in week number 3, Saturday, June 21st. But we will see what happens after the adrenaline goes down. They get back to BC. Who knows what happens, because an oblique injury is nothing to joke at, especially when it comes to the quarterback position as well. Having to deal with that part of your body every play, every time you're throwing. Even in handoffs, I would imagine you're kind of straining yourself a little bit as well. Either way you go. So something to monitor for sure. The other unfortunate part, kind of speaking offensively here before we get, we'll talk about the defense a little bit before we get out of here, but the game script unfortunately took out one of the Lions' best weapons offensively when it comes to a guy like James Butler. Once you're down 7-zip, basically off rip, wicka, call me a little rapper, you hear? Once you're down 7-zip, off rip, got bars tonight, folks. Once you're down 7-0 right away, and then the Lions don't show much offensively. I know early on they were kind of trying to establish that run, still trying to believe in it, and they didn't. They didn't. I was almost getting to that point of like, okay, Buck, let's not beat our head against the door now, trying to establish a run and let the Bombers run away with it. I thought they did it a reasonable amount of times to try to get that run game going to help alleviate some of that pressure that was being sent by the Bombers defense. And that's another way you can actually relieve some of that pressure, is gash them in the run game. With that being said, they were just shutting down what limited touches JB got in the first half and overall in this game. JB, I wasn't a pretty day. I believe we just over 20 yards on about 10 or 11 carries, double-digit carries for sure. And just was an unfortunate one because of game script, as I mentioned, where you look at a guy like Matthew Peterson, 23 carries, I believe, for 130 yards, a guy that was able to get in routine, get in rhythm. Obviously, within those 23 carries, you're going to have those no-yard gains, minus gains even, where if you have, that 10, 11 yard, 10, 11, 12 carries in a game, those 4 or 5, carries that you don't have many yards, or you get back to the line of scrimmage, kind of show up a little bit more. Maybe not even show up more, but you just kind of remember them a little bit more, opposed to when you have a little bit of a bigger sample size throughout the game. So one last thing that I want to touch on before we kind of wrap things up offensively would be the offensive line and how much blame, criticism you want to give to the offensive line. As of now, I'm going to give a little bit of blame, criticism, whatever you want to say, to the offensive line, but ultimately not much. I would say a lot of the time I saw Nathan under pressure, and a lot of the time I saw JB kind of getting tackled in the backfield. A lot of heavier boxes, a lot of pressure, a lot of sending extra guys that the line can't block. Now, I will say there was a few times where there was three-man rushes, and they were getting home. There was one that Glenn Cedar talked about on the broadcast early on there, where it was a straight up three-man rush to start. Kyrie Wilson came late off the edge, but came late and should have been considered a three-man rush with an extra fourth blitzer coming off the edge, which it was. And the Lions still struggled to pick it up. Nate was pressured, had to get rid of the ball. I believe it was an incomplete pass actually on the play. So some of the Lions need to just be more consistent, right? We're going to have some of those bad games, especially against some of the pro athletes in the defensive line, along the defensive line in the CFL. You're going to have some of those games where you struggle. We saw it from maybe a team like the Argos, who I feel like their offensive line is a lot better than they showed last week. I think the BC Lions offensive line is better than they showed this week, and especially with a guy like Anai Una, who was a full participant in practice, was projected to be the starter at right guard going into the season. do we see a little bit of a shakeup? And not really a little bit of a shakeup because, as I said, he was the projected starter at right guard. But do we see a little bit of a juggling in the starting lineup of the offensive line now, with maybe bringing out a guy like Chris Slugger, inserting a guy like Ana back into the offensive line starting rotation, and just try to get a little bit of continuity now with that group going forward, and trying to, as I said, be as consistent as you can as an offensive line group moving forward. Before, and like I said too, I would love to go back and rewatch the game a little bit more, and something I'll do for sure this weekend before I give a little bit more of a criticism on kind of the offensive line. So something to probably stick around. Make sure you're following not only our Canadian Football Fanatics Twitter account, but my personal one. Super simple for you guys, at Cole McGarvey, no spaces. Cole, Cole, McGarvey, McGarvey. V is in Victor. Other than that, I think that is a good one that's good enough for the offense. Defense, as I mentioned earlier, they got absolutely gashed, which is not great. The next one now is I will eat some crow. I know I'm not the only one, but Chris Strevler, golf clap. I will tip my cap to you, sir. I not in a million years saw a performance like this coming from you, nor did I think that you would be able to put together a consistent performance like this. I think you are rightfully a professional quarterback, good enough to be a professional quarterback. I just think you struggle with some of the consistencies when it comes to being a quarterback. And you showed tonight that you gave me you stuck the middle finger up and said, I can prove you wrong, and you're kind of a you're doing your thing for a reason. I'm doing my thing for a reason, pretty much. So Chris Strevler had himself a pretty good day. Now, obviously, there was some inconsistencies that I and a lot of people expected, but to be honest, when the moments, were the biggest, he made some of the bigger throws of the game to start the game. Opening drive of the game, makes multiple big throws. The touchdown pass to Dembski, beautiful throw. Both touchdown passes to Dembski, beautiful throws. A couple nice arm angle, arm slot changes, balls to Wheatfall that he was making some heck of throws, hell of throws. And as I said earlier in the show, I said it multiple times, not only on the preview show, on our weekly show, of limit, contain, and stop Brady Oliveira at the time. Obviously, that would change with a guy like Matthew Peterson coming in with Brady Oliveira's injury, of still obviously trying to contain the run, but maybe you can look towards stopping the pass a little bit more now. Not obviously discounting Matthew Peterson anymore, but the bigger threats turn to that receiving core a little bit more. Chris Streveler was dialed in today, folks, and especially with Zach Claros kind of coming back next week, was able to, I feel like, really leave a good taste in a lot of Bombers fans, minds, and myself, CFL fans' minds. So, as I said, big shout out to Chris Streveler. He proved me and a lot of people wrong tonight by slinging the rock all over the field, and had himself a pretty good performance, led his team to victory. So, secondary, I guess I got to talk about it, unfortunately. Our guy, Gary Peters, had himself a tough night at the office. Although it started out pretty good. He had himself an interception early on. That was Gary Peters doing Gary Peters things. It was a great play to jump the ball, come off that backside hip of the receiver. Chris Streveler, I don't think, probably saw him, and he was able to read the quarterback's eyes. Gary Peters is who I'm talking about, reading the quarterback's eyes. Was able to jump in front of it and get the interception. And from that point on, he got targeted a few times, which is rare, and was giving up some big plays, a couple of back-breaking type plays, some first downs, things that we are not accustomed to seeing Gary Peters do. I'm going to make it nice and quick and sweet with Gary Peters and say that he is still one of the best corners in the CFL, bar none, and still doing it at a high level at his age. I'm not too worried about Gary. I think he's going to bounce back and be just fine and be the Gary Peters that we know him to be throughout the rest of the season. I would say that I think this is kind of one thing that you also have to be aware in the next few seasons of. the decline of Gary Peters and one trying to, start to, get some guys in here that are maybe going to be the potential future of the secondary, right? Of, guys that maybe will be around for the next few years of basically the next TJ Lee, Gary Peters, hopefully, of the next 10 years in the BC Lions secondary, guys that are stalwarts within the community, on the field, and within the fan base, I guess is probably the best way to put it. So Gary Peters, tough into the office, but I expect him to bounce back next week versus Winnipeg and have another good game and be back to his old self. The pass rush. The pass rush was a tough one, right? With a lot being talked about of going into the season of do they have a Robin to their Batman in Matthew Betts? The verdict is definitely still out on that, although I would say there is some positivity when it comes to a guy like Kameka Toure, who I think is showing some flashes, rushing the passer and in the run game being active. A guy like Jordan Tabai, who was very highly talked about within the organization this offseason, who has shown it on the field so far through 2 games. Dwayne Hendricks has had himself, I feel like, a decent 2 games as well, making a few plays, showing some flash. Matthew Betts had himself a quieter day. Like I said on the preview, on the post-game report last week, I thought he was close multiple times. Actually led the CFL in quarterback pressures last week. They were underwhelming, I thought, this week. I thought the defensive line could have did a better job getting some pressure on Chris Strevler, especially on some of those bigger throws where he had multiple seconds in the pocket, had the opportunity to, survey the field, moonball a couple of those shots where, he put some air under it, wasn't afraid of getting hit. There wasn't guys around him. So as much as I like some flashes from the BC Lions defensive line, I thought there was a lot more to be desired, if we're being completely honest, from the defensive line. So kind of a problem that comes in tandem with stopping the run, the defensive struggles as a whole, is, winning that battle line of scrimmage and, being able to affect the other team's passing, being able to affect the other team's passer, and being able to limit and stop the other team's running ability. And the Lions were not great at either. So, probably not a surprise that things played out the way they do. That being said, folks, before we kind of we start to kind of wrap things up here on the show, my last point would be that the Lions just ultimately didn't play complementary football tonight. Were the Winnipeg Blue Bombers the better team? 100% the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were the better team here tonight. The Lions absolutely had every chance to win this football game tonight. Going into the halftime down 8, being in the fourth quarter down 14 with momentum. Whenever the Lions would do good on one unit, the other one would let them down. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, right, early on in the game, the defense is doing a good job of limiting the damage that could have been done early on, right, with the offense not getting a lot of things going. The defense was on the field quite a bit, right, and a lot of 2-and-outs from the offense, a lot of quick possessions, where the defense was holding them into the game for a majority of that first half. Of it could have been a lot worse if the defense wasn't able to get some of the stops they were able to get in the first half. The game would have gotten out of hand a lot quicker than it did. Considering they were only down 14 points, 7 at half, as I mentioned, 14 points in the fourth quarter, having a 14 points with 10 minutes to go. That is still an eternity in the CFL. They get a scoring drive, they get a little bit of a spark, and then the lack of complementary football. They watch Chris Strevler lead the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for a 108-yard back-breaking touchdown drive to pull ahead again, to kind of give them that stiff arm, say, not today. We're going to keep pulling ahead. Every time you guys get close, we're pulling back ahead. We're getting that 2-touchdown lead once again. And as I said, I think that was the biggest problem for the BC Lions today. Ultimately, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were the better team. That's okay to admit. I feel like they just didn't play complementary football today from the BC Lions. So a few others here before we get out of here, folks. Thought it was an interesting one that we got I shouldn't say an interesting one. It was a unique one that we had a pregame injury, actually. I had to kind of do some shuffling and juggling around in the lineup, and actually showed out to be pretty costly today, if we're being pretty honest, if we're being completely honest. And that was the injury to Jermaine Jackson, who was reported to sustain an injury in warmups today. Our kick returner, kick and punt returner over not over the last week. Going into the year, he was announced starting. The starter at kick returner, Jermaine Jackson, who I thought showed some flashes throughout preseason and last week, sustained a injury in warm-up, so wasn't able to go. Robert Carter Jr. and Stanley Berryhill ended up having to take reps returning the football, and Robert Carter got plastered multiple times, not only, not generating good field position, giving the other team and the crowd, especially in Princess Auto Stadium, momentum. Some of the hits, and when talking about Stanley Berryhill, he gets popped, fumble. That's another complementary football of BC just allows a touchdown. You're going to kind of get the ball back with 10 minutes to go, down 14. Can you kind of pull back in within one possession to make things tight, to make things kind of realistic of getting this comeback complete? And on the next kickoff, you fumble with the football, giving the Bombers back possession of the football. And lo and behold, they end up missing a field goal, keeping you in the game, and you just still ultimately can't come back to win. At some point, it's just not your night, and I think tonight was just not the BC Lions' night. One of those games where it's just not, the ball is not bouncing your way, and that's just going to happen throughout a 18-game season. It's unfortunate, but is what it is. It's on to the next one. So before we get out of here, folks, of course, we have our game balls to give out. And we're going to give a honorable mention one here first before we give our game ball out. And this should say a lot to how the game went, that I am giving an honorable mention game ball out to Carl Myers, punter of the BC Lions. Yes, I said it, folks. Honorable mention game ball to Carl Myers. Heck, let's pass him a game ball, folks. Carl Myers, you get a game ball. We'll give out two tonight. I'll give one out for Blake, and I'll give one out for myself. Carl Myers, you're getting a game ball between the goalposts. Shout out to him on Instagram, on Twitter. I know he's probably smiling right now if he's listening. Carl Myers had 9 punts tonight, averaging 46.9 yards average on a punt, basically 47 yards per punt, flipping the field a lot for the Lions tonight, giving them an opportunity, as I mentioned, in complementary football side of things. Carl Myers was doing his complementary side, and the Lions defense or offense was not, having him going out on the field that many times and not being able to get stops. Carl Myers' day goes unnoticed, unfortunately. He also had 3 punts land inside the 20-yard line. I believe it was a total of 9 punts for about like 400 and something yards total. So, as I said, it makes out to about a 46.9 yards average, 47 yards per punt. We'll take that all season. He's only had about, I think, one moon ball where he actually got a hold of it, and it was a bomb. I'm expecting to see a few more of those throughout the season. If he can stay this consistent with having 4 or 5 just moon balls, just moon shots that go 60, 70 yards, Carl Myers is going to have a job in the CFL for a long time, as long as he can stay consistent, because he is an absolute cannon. When he gets a hold of it from time to time, it takes off. So, honorable mention game ball to one Carl Myers. Now, my game ball should probably be no surprise here of the best player who was on the field here tonight for the BC Lions, who was Keon Hatcher. Keon Hatcher, I love this because of how big of a fan I am of Hatch, and having known everything he's dealt with the Achilles injury in 2023 in the West Final versus Winnipeg, fighting back through all the rehab, etc., getting back onto the field in 2024 and not being maybe to his true self, maybe being a half step behind of what we're used to, and I would imagine he's used to. I said it last week that I'm seeing that old Keon Hatcher back, that that quick in and out of his breaks, in and out of his, he's showing that nice quick burst, I guess is the for lack of a better word. being able to command, we saw tonight, the TSN broadcast talk about it, of the somewhat of the game plan seemed to be take away Hatcher and or McInnes from the lines here tonight and try to make other receivers beat you. And Hatcher was commanding a lot of, safety help, double teams. Now, whether they were kind of just trying to take away that deep downfield option and whoever was converting downfield was kind of going to get double team, whether it was McInnes or Hatcher. It turned out to be a Hatcher all the time. I tweeted out during the game, combined with the attention other teams are giving to Keon Hatcher, just shows that Keon Hatcher is back to that level of being one of the better CFL receivers in the entire league. His touchdown, the 77-yard touchdown from Nathan Rourke, confirms that Keon Hatcher is back to playing at that level. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Keon Hatcher does for the rest of the season, paired with a guy like Nathan Rourke, as well as having Justin McInnes at his prime alongside him. I think that's only going to be a benefit for the both of them, McInnes and Hatcher, opening each other up. I am really looking forward to moving forward if Keon Hatcher can be back to kind of that 1B/number 2, a legit number 2 receiver, alongside a guy like McInnes, who I think is that number 1. And if, Hatcher gets back to or close to the 2022 level, he's kind of that 1A, 1B with Hatcher and McInnes. The only thing I didn't love when it comes to Keon Hatcher's night is that he had 11 targets for only 4 catches. Just wasn't able to get on the rock as much as we would have liked. That being said, still a monster night for Keon Hatcher, and I still expect big things from him coming this season. I think that is going to put a bow finally on the post-game recap, about just under an hour in, which is perfect. I didn't want to go too long here tonight, but of course we end up, as always, folks, it kind of just happens when you're rambling, when you're having fun. But as always, when we come on the post-game report after a loss, you get your feelings out, you get a little bit of your frustration out, and you start to feel better. You start to get a refreshing outlook on the BC Lions and how they are moving forward. And of course, last season, all that positive outlook, all that kind of, looking on the bright side of after post-game reports didn't work out for them so well, because they ended up going home, going golfing after the first round of the playoffs. It is still early on in the season, only week 2. No time to press the panic button. As of now, there's still a lot of parity, a lot of competition in the West Division. Losing to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers without Zach Collaros under center is definitely a kick in the dick, to put it lightly. That being said, it is not a press the panic button. It is not a season ender. They are professional athletes, just like the BC Lions on the other side. They are motivated to win just as much as the BC Lions. Now, obviously, with Zach Collaros not there, you would love to see them win. The BC Lions should have no excuses for tonight, right? Take the loss on the chin, move on to the next one, take advantage of that mini bye, get ready for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in your house in BC Place, and make sure that in 9 days' time, you guys walk away with a victory. Split the season series with Winnipeg, because these two teams do not see each other once again throughout the regular season. Only 2 times in 2025, and it's going to happen very quick. It's going to happen before the first month of the season is even over. And as I said on Twitter, these West Division matchups, as early as they are in the season, you might scoff at it of week 2, week 3, and playoff implications being on the line. They are, especially when it comes to season series. Whoever's going to win the season series, if the Bombers win it, that pretty much, unless the BC Lions have a outright better record than them, the Bombers will finish above them. The Bombers could, obviously, if it's between first place, second place, third place, heck, if it's even between third place and getting into the playoffs, the Bombers are going to have that edge. This becomes a huge, huge game when it comes to West Division standings, especially if how a lot of people think the West Division comes down to splitting first place to fourth place between 2 or 3 games. These games come that much more important down the season. So losing these games, although it's kind of, from my perspective, all good, on to the next one. Right now, the sense of urgency needs to be high for the BC Lions next week. They need to come out prepared. They need to not have a slow start versus Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They need to come out hungry, ready to go, ready to take a home victory away from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, just the way the Winnipeg Blue Bombers did from the BC Lions, and make sure that they leave week 3 2-1 on the season. So, other than that, folks, of course, like the video, as I said, comment down below. Let us know how you guys are feeling. Hopefully, by the time you guys are done listening to this, 55 minutes in, as I said, take a little deep breath. Woo saw, folks. Every little thing is gonna be all right. I'm not gonna sing too much on my YouTube here, folks, because I'm not a good singer, number one, and I don't know if you guys want to hear me sing. So every little thing is gonna be all right. Of course, the longer this goes, then maybe not everything's gonna be all right. So there's still some things to be obviously critical on, and I think we talked about them on the post-game report. That being said, I think the Lions are all good moving forward. They got to be urgent still, of course. They got to look themselves in the mirror. They got to be realistic as well. They can't just make excuses for themselves. Look yourselves in the mirror. Go into this little weekend break here. Rest, recover, come back next week ready to go, and be ready for a dogfight. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to be ready to steal this next game in BC Place, away from BC Lions, the BC Lions, and BC Lions fans. So it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye out. Will Nathan Rourke play? Zach Collaros back. Can Nathan Rourke bump the slump versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? There is a lot to be talked about and to be a lot of storylines to follow going into next week. Of course, the BC Lions are back at home, so we should be in attendance. Can't wait for that one, of course. We will be back next week with a preview. We'll see if Schnitzy is going to go 2 for 2, if we're going to try to line up another guest. And, of course, the weekly show where I'm going to get some crumb. I was talking too much-ish last night, folks. If I was bragging 4-0, we're 4-1 now, unfortunately. That's the way things go. Of course, it was going to be an undefeated season. I don't think that was realistic. I was kind of joking alongside being maybe a little bit too cocky last night of being undefeated now, 4-1, a little bit of humble pie. All good, though. Still winning the season series as of now. Hoping to pick up some more wins for the rest of the weekend. That being said, though, as I mentioned, like, comment, subscribe. When you guys subscribe, press the notification bell. You guys will get notified every single time we go live or upload any videos on the channel. Last, thank you when talking about the YouTube. Very thankful for all you guys that are tuning in every week, every video, for all your continued support. We are up over 400 subscribers, folks. Very happy to say that and hit our milestone of 400 subscribers. But with that being said, if you guys could subscribe, if you guys are listening right now, because over 75% of you, yes, you, wherever my camera is, yes, you are unsubscribed to the channel. So please subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated if you guys do. When you guys do, of course, as I said, like and comment on the video, but sharing the video, sharing our content helps us out greatly as well. And of course, following us on our social media platforms at Canadian Football Fanatics on Instagram, at _CF Fanatics on Twitter or X. With that being said, folks, the BC Lions fall to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 34-20 in week number 2. And we will see you guys for a BC Lions preview next in about a week's time. Other than that, you guys will catch us on the weekly show and follow along, of course, for more content. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you guys on the next video.